Welcome, Deidre. I see you're still in the process of connecting. It's good. I think Dana's connected, joined us. Waiting on Deidre. So far, there's only two. Let's give ourselves a couple of minutes. Dana, did you already do your class test? Guys, can you hear me?
Oh, no, I haven't done the class test yet. I was in Constantia this morning. That's why, because we had to pick up a script for my medication.
Okay. No, I just saw that you've marked attendance already, so you've been on the site already, but you have not had that dedicated half an hour to sit down and do the class test. Don't worry about it. You've got the whole rest of the day. I'm not going to give any questions away or give you any hints now. Don't worry. So, I mean, it's going to be fair.
No, please don't.
Deidre, everything good? So far, it's only two that have joined us.
Ja, meneer.
Great. manage.
Ja, meneer, ek het nou die dag vir meneer 'n mail gestuur oor die taak, maar meneer het nog maar geantwoord het.
Deidre, op hierdie stadium, ek het 'n bietjie probleme met die e-pos. Ons het verlede Vrydag het ons e-pos gekry van Prestige af, van ons IT hoof af, dat hulle is besig met die migration van die stelsels na die Stadio stelsel toe, en dat ons gaan nie e-posse hê. Dit was nou Vrydagmiddag, letterlik oor die hele naweek tot Maandagoggend nie, en toe op Maandagoggend gecheck het toe, kon ek nie ingaan nie, en ek sien toe ook dat mevrou Liebenberg het toe e-pos uitgestuur van almal dat daar is bietjie probleme met die e-posse, en dat meneer Webb is besig om daaraan te werk. Ek het intussen een dag internet toegang gehad of e-pos toegang gehad en 'n ander dag nie. So ek is gewoonlik in daai tussenin situasie. Maar jy is welkom om enige vrae nou vir my te vra as jy wil. Ek gaan so 5 minute toelaat, ons net in die algemeen kan gesels. Ek het weer deur die taak gegaan en ek dink wat ek agtergekom het byvoorbeeld is dat ons gaan waarskynlik die datum van inhandiging moet skuif. Ek sal dit aankondig ook later amptelik, en ek sal ook die veranderinge maak op die taak wat op Moodle is. Want ek het gesien dat daar is 'n seksie van die werk wat ons gaan doen eers nadat die inhandigingsdatum gedoen is. Ek weet nie of hoe daai enetjie deurgeslip het nie, maar die feit van die saak is op hierdie stadium, as ons bly by die 4de Augustus, wat nou letterlik eers komende Maandag oor 'n week is, dan gaan ons nog nie al die werk gedek het wat julle in die taak moet doen nie. So ek het dit deur die loop van gister en vanoggend agtergekom. So ek sê dit nou sommer vir julle, maar ek gaan dit ook nou amptelik aankondig en dan die veranderinge maak ook. En net weer vir almal herinner daaraan wanneer ons volgende week weer Zoom. Maar die belangrikste vir my is op hierdie stadium is dat dat julle goed voorbereid is vir die taak, en dat al die dinge wat in die assignment verwag word, dat dit ten minste gedek is. En dat op hierdie stadium wil ek ook nie verander aan die rooster en van daai modules op 'n ander tyd aanbied nie, of vroeër byvoorbeeld nie, want daar's 'n redelike kronologiese verloop, veral omdat dit gaan, jy sal sien ook dat die handboek se hoofstukke volg as waar die stappe wat deur die sales proses gevolg word. Met ander woorde, jy kan nie 'n sale close voordat jy nie begin het met die prospecting nie. So daar is stappe wat kronologies op mekaar volg, en vir daai rede wil ek nie sommer net 'n hoofstuk gaan aanbied nie, en dan verloor mens hierdie storielyn nie. So is makliker om die datum te skuif. Dis nie vir my 'n groot issue nie.
Ja, want ek sukkel met daai met vraag 4 wat hulle sê die steps in planning of 'n sales call, want daar's een wat sê planning the sales call en dan 'n ander een waar weer staan the steps in planning of a sales call. Nou as ek so 'n bietjie onseker oor die twee, wat die een dit sal wees van die figures wat ek moet gebruik.
Kyk, jou stappe in die sales, steps in the sales process. Dit gaan oor wat ons in hoofstuk 1 gedoen het. Dis al daardie stappe wat volg, wat begin by prospecting en wat eindig by die close en die follow-up. Dis basies daai
Ek
10
bedoel
stappe.
die sales call, die planning. Daar's
Sales-
een die planning, dis sales call en die ander een is the steps in planning of is sales call, maar dis chapter 7 wat ons nog nie behandel het.
Ja, dis korrek. Dis een van die goedes waarom ek sê ons gaan nog ons sal nie by daai vraag kan uitkom en is ook geen wonder dat jy op hierdie stadium nog nie duidelikheid het oor wat jy daarmee doen nie, want ons het nog nie daai hoofstuk gedoen nie. Ons doen vandag hoofstuk 5 basies, en dan gaan ons 6 en 7 volgende week doen. So jy sou letterlik as ons by oorspronklike inhandigingsdatum gebly het van die 4de Augustus, dan sou jy basies 3/4 van jou taak kon voltooi het. Maar daai spesifieke aspekte wat jy nou uitgelig het, is werk wat uit daai hoofstukke kom wat ons nog moet doen, ja. So
Okay.
ja, so nee, jy moenie daaroor stres nie. Jy het dit reg geïnterpreteer, met ander woorde, jy het die regte hoofstuk gelink met die regte vraag. Ons het nog net nie daai werk gedoen nie, ja.
Okay. Nee, want ek het nou nie lekker verstaan wat hier aangaan en ek het ja, kom maar eers vir meneer vra wat hier aangaan so.
Nee, jy moet glad nie daaroor stres nie. Nee, jy het nie ergens iets gemis nie, moenie worry nie. En ek sal ook nie vir jou iets vra om te doen as ons nog nie die werk gehad het of behandel het nie, of op 'n manier gezoom het, of daar's 'n pre-recorded of 'n pre-recorded video nie. Vandag se hoofstuk oor hoe jy jouself manage en ook hoe jy jou tyd manage. In other words, self-management en time management is belangrike komponente en daardie 3 video's is reeds op Moodle, so julle kan enige tyd daarna gaan kyk. Ek sal obviously dan ook hierdie Zoom sessie dan oplaai net na ons vanmiddag klaar is. Ek het nou 2 klasse net na mekaar, so as ons hierna 4 uur se kan, dan sal hy klaar gekonvert wees en dan laai kom net op en sit hom op Moodle ook. Maar dit wat ons vandag, wat ons nou gaan bespreek, is reeds op Moodle en is reeds in 'n PowerPoint formaat as ook in 'n video formaat.
Okay. Dankie meneer.
Okay, toe ek net ook vinnig opgegaan het om te kyk wie het nou vanoggend attendance gedoen en wie het nou al die klastoetsie geskryf, te sien ek daar's 'n paar wat besig is met die klastoets. So ek neem aan op hierdie stadium dis van die redes hoekom hulle ons nie kan join nie. So vir daai spesifieke rede, ek dink ons het genoeg tyd gegee vir almal om ons te join. Net 'n herinnering weer, hierdie sessie soos wat julle nou ingeskakel het, dit is die korrekte sessie vir 'n week vir personal selling. Die donderdag 5de periode is die periode wat ons weekliks gaan Zoom. Die ander is als pre-recorded sessies. Ek sal ook sommer vanaand gou vinnig die klastoetsies klaar gemerk het en dis nie 'n groot en 'n moeilike ene nie of moeilike dinge nie. In feite julle behoort nie die volle 30 minute se vat daarvoor nie. Die wat dit nog nie gedoen het nie. En ja, dan kan ons sommer volgende week ook vinnig daarna kyk want ons wil terugvoer uit 'n klastoets soos hierdie is waardevol, maar vir my meer belangrik is dat dit is eintlik vir julle 'n tipe van 'n snapshot van waar is jy is jy in beheer van jou werk op hierdie stadium. Dis hoekom ons daai klein happies vat sodat as die olifant éventueel opgeëet kry. Right, ek gaan gou vinnig die skerm verander na wat ons wil doen vandag. In die proses probeer ek my bes om hier so 'n baie lastige vlieg ontslae te raak van. Maar dit is nou maar deel van dink ek normale uitdagings in 'n dag. Soos julle kan sien van daai image op die skerm, dit is 'n amper dit is 'n 24 uur job om 'n sales manager om in sales te wees. And to manage yourself, because you're going to be multitasking, and the skills that you require to manage yourself and manage your time are not just skills that is specifically reserved for the profession of sales. These are methods and that we can use in our daily lives just to organize our own lives personally and plan our own lives, manage our own lives, and as well as our time. Because at the end of the day, you are a human being who has a life that includes working if you're a salesperson, and is not just defined by you working in sales. Let's quickly look at what we want to achieve in this chapter. For me, importantly, I'm not going to go through each of these individually. They are in your manual. They are also in the PowerPoints. They're also in the videos. So I don't want to repeat myself in any way, but this particular chapter, chapter 5, that deals with managing yourself and also managing your time, I think we can break up into 3 parts, and I think I've done the videos in that way as well. Firstly, you need to be able to manage yourself. You need to manage your own goals and your own life and be content with yourself as an individual before you can actually focus on managing your job. And then also with that comes time management, which is the second part of this chapter. And then finally, we're going to be looking at managing stress, because again, stress is not a condition of the body and the mind that is reserved for the sales profession. It's a condition that all of us experience, regardless of if we are studying and going through anxiety attacks before exams and stress before handing dates for assignments, or if you're working and need to meet sales deadlines. Regardless, we all at some point experience stress, and we'll be looking at how why we stress and what causes the stress or can cause it, and then also look at although professional help is highly recommended, and I think if once you have identified that you are suffering from stress, and hopefully it's not identified only when you burn out, I think we have included some helpful hints and telltales that signs that that will indicate that you are suffering from stress and that you actually need professional help. One of the reasons I think that most people eventually burn out is because they do not identify the signs, the warning signs, or they do, but then they just ignore it. They don't act on it, and then also they don't want to admit it. But we'll deal with that in the final section of this chapter. I think importantly for us is to start off with, and we all know who he is, and maybe you don't, but Theodore Roosevelt was the 26th president of the United States of America. He was also conservationist, very much into nature. He was a naturalist as well, a writer, and he made a very important statement. I think that is very valuable for us in this chapter. If you play hard, and if you work, don't play at all. It's very valuable coming from not just him as a U.S. statesman, but also it's also something that we can apply in the modern day sales profession as well. Right. Sales is a 24/7 job. It doesn't mean you're going to work 24 hours in a day. What it means is that you have to be extremely alert and awake and observant, and especially for opportunities. You should operate in a structured manner from a particular script, yes, and there must be order and structure, but you also should not lose the ability to observe any opportunities that might arise, because if you don't take the opportunity, someone else is definitely going to do that, without a doubt. So I think we can say that basically just purely from the nature of the work that we do as salespeople, we are managers, and we are expected to manage ourselves, because our hours are not necessarily as salespeople a 9 to 5 or 8 to 4. It's very often because of the 24/7 nature of the job, is extended beyond normal hours, and sometimes it starts later in the day and it finishes later in a particular day. But in a 24-hour cycle, I think you will manage to fit in effectively 8 to 9 hours of work in a day, which is healthy. Anything more than that is challenging. And therefore, we know that the time is limited. We know that there are 24 hours in a day and there's 7 days in a week, and usually there's 5 working days, and there's 365 days in the year. Therefore, the one thing that we cannot change is that we are given a certain amount of time. What we need to do, and we'll do that in the second part of this chapter, is to determine how exactly and how most effectively we can manage the time that is so valuable to us as salespeople. We fortunately have, in the last couple of decades, and especially in the last decade, the sales profession has, as a result of the innovations and the development of information technology, we have been able to, now when I say we, I'm talking about the sales profession, the salesperson or salespeople have, as a result of all these changes and improvements and innovations, have now been able to do their work almost anywhere and almost at any time, because of our smart devices that we have and our internet stability and accessibility that is actually improving almost on a monthly basis in our country. It has, because it has provided us with the flexibility of almost working from wherever you are. So your office is not limited to a specific building and structured in a certain specific business hours. It brings the challenges of you having to manage your time more efficiently and carefully, so you still remain in control of these electronic devices, and not the reverse. And I think that's a lesson that is learned very early on by anybody in sales. Initially, you're very excited, you're enthusiastic. I tell you what, and I experienced it myself. When it was in the late 90s, I was working at the Sports Science Institute in Newlands, and I was living in Durbanville. And because it was a new job, you're obviously very enthusiastic. I enjoyed my job, and you're eager, and you want to do this. You almost don't want to say no to anybody. And I think that's one of the traps that you already step into, and that is that very early on you learn when to say yes and when to say no without insulting the people that you say no to. And I found that being stuck in traffic every morning on the N1 was a challenge. And people were calling you all the time. After 7 o'clock, people know you're in traffic, they know on the way to work, they call you on your cell phone. And then I realized after a week or so, but hang on, most of these calls that I get, I actually cannot resolve until I'm actually at the office. And I decided to then rather get in my car, put on my music of choice, get myself in the right mood, switch my phone off or switch it onto silent, so at least if there's a family emergency, I can still be reached. And then only deal with everything that happens for people that have called you while you were in traffic on the way to the office. Once you get to the office, it took me 2 weeks, and everybody that used to phone me that time in the morning didn't phone me anymore, because they realized that I'm still in traffic and I'm still on the way to work. So you have to still manage it, although accessibility is now makes it great. I mean, people can phone you wherever and at any time. You still have to manage it. I think virtual time has become a very real aspect. Even before lockdown and COVID-19, virtual meetings have ensured that salespeople could actually now do calls and meetings more efficiently and at different times in the day, and even across certain geographical areas. You can actually now Zoom somebody and have your presentation done than getting in a vehicle and driving for 3 hours to get to your destination to do a half-an-hour presentation. So it's a reality, and it's something that salespeople obviously need to manage as well. Now, like anything in life, it is of no consequence. We are not going to be able to manage anything if we do not have two aspects in place, and that's to start off by setting goals, because then we actually are setting a particular target, and then also putting it into action, and then finally evaluating it. There's nothing to evaluate at the end if you haven't set the goal in the beginning. So that's why we start off by specifically looking at the importance of setting goals. And it is important to set goals because once you've set goals, it gives you sort of a purpose, it gives you structure. It immediately implies that you are focused and you're definitely sure where you're going and how you're going to get there. And especially for salespeople who are going to have flexible working hours and have to be very self-disciplined. Now, before you actually set your sales goals for your business, you need to also ensure that you have set very specific personal goals, what you want to achieve. I can remember I just got married. We were living in Stellenbosch, or renting a place in Stellenbosch. And one morning, I opened the newspaper and there was an article on a new residential development happening on the West Coast, just past, I think, Langebaan. And there were architectural illustrations of what the properties would look like when they're finished, or the houses. And I quite enjoyed that. I actually grabbed a pair of scissors and I cut out the particular photograph or sketch, and I stuck it on my mirror because I wanted to use that as a motivation for me, and I set it to myself as a goal to live in a house like that in a specific number of years. I can't recall what sort of time frame I've set myself. And lo and behold, in 2012, I actually moved into a house almost similar to that. So the goal has been achieved. I can't recall if it actually happened in the time frame that I've set, but the fact is we have to be very clear on our goals. We have to set certain personal goals because that's our motivation to do our jobs to the best of our ability every day. And that's why before you start setting work goals and sales goals as a sales representative, you need to ensure that you have your personal goals and mission sorted out as well. It gives you something to aim at. It gives you a target to aim at, and that's very important. Imagine a 100-meter sprint. The guys in the blocks at the starting line knows where the race finishes. They can see the line. That's their goal. They want to get there as quickly as possible. If there was no line at the finish, people would just run, and then they will say, stop, you've passed 100 meters and we've taken your time. You've already run the extra 15 meters, but don't worry about that. We took your time with 100 meters. No, we know that given a target that to aim at, we become more productive. There are some guidelines that we do use when we set our goals, and that is to ensure that that they are realistic and achievable, but they need to also be slightly challenging, because if it's just too easy to reach, I mean, what's the point? So it has to be realistic, but it could be a bit challenging as well to get, but reachable. you need to be able to evaluate your goals. You also need to put your goals in writing, as I said, like I did with my photograph that I stuck on the mirror. And you need to be able to measure it, because if you don't measure it, then you don't get any feedback. You don't know if you're actually still on track. So you have to, on a regular basis, measure your goals by evaluating them to see if you actually are still on the right track and achieving them. There's a number of goals that has types of goals that has been identified. As a matter of fact, 12 categories. They're all on the screen. I'm not going to read it to you. I think you're more than competent to do that. But it basically goes anything from personal goals, family goals, health goals, right up to spiritual, social, and financial goals and career goals as well. Make sure that you tick all these boxes. But salespeople are going to operate predominantly in 3 specific broad goal categories. They will have performance goals, in other words, goals that are linked to specific outcomes. These are the ones that are set first, because if we achieve them, it means that we've actually been successful in executing our job. They are quantifiable. In other words, we measure them in units. It could be a percentage as a commission. It could be the number of cars that we have to sell this month. It could be an amount, maybe 100,000 Rand as a turnover that we have to reach as a target. In other words, specific, challenging, and definitely time-based. We want to increase our sales by 5% over the next 3 months. That is challenging enough because the economy is tight at the moment. It's time-based because it's a 3-month period, and it is specific. It's a 5%. So that is an example of a performance goal that is specific, challenging, as well as time-based. But then we also set ourselves some activity goals. Now, activity goals is specifically a plan of action. How many people do we have to call today? How many presentations do we have to do today to reach our targets? So it's an indication, our activity goals, on how hard are we prepared to work. We know how many people we need to see if we want to reach our specific goals. Activity goals are also called intermediary goals, because if you achieve them, they are translated into performance goals. When we get to the next slides and we look at our conversion goals, it will be, we can use the example of that funnel that they have there. Usually they say that in sales, that if you are phoning a prospect for the first time, in other words, it's a cold call. You've never spoken to that person before. They don't know what you're offering, and you don't know what their background is. When you are making cold calls like that, for every 10 of those cold calls that you make, 5 of them would actually qualify in the sense that they can afford your product, they have a need for your product. Out of those 5, 3 of them would be interested. 2 of those 3 would actually eventually make an appointment so that you can do the presentation to them, and 1 person out of that would buy your product and become a customer. In other words, the ratio of 10, 5, 3, 2, 1 is for complete cold call new business, and you will see that that ratio improves as you become more efficient and as you become more experienced. In other words, you are going to get more experience at the top. So you're not chasing 10 people anymore, or you are qualifying your people better. In other words, out of the 10, not 5, but maybe 8 are actually qualified for your product. And out of those 8, you might even have 7 who are now interested in the product, and 5 maybe resulting in presentations, and might even be 5 out of 5 who are eventually going to then become a customer and buy your products. So the more effort you put in, the higher your ratios are, the more efficient you would be as a sales rep. You want to achieve the ratio of 1 call that immediately results in interview for a presentation that results in a sale. It does happen eventually once you've established your business. But starting off scratch, those are usually the numbers that we look at. So in other words, if we go back to the previous slide, you'll see that right at the bottom, that image, activity goals versus performance goals for the month. The goal was to make 450 calls. So far, we've achieved 12%. We've had 54 calls. We've made 54 calls. That was the first objective or first goal. How many of those calls were successful? In other words, that resulted in people showing interest in making and wanting to make appointments. Well, out of the 450, you said that you wanted 300 of them at least to be successful calls. So far, you've had 36. In other words, 36 out of your 54 calls have so far been successful. Although the 36 out of 300 is also 12%, your 36 successful calls out of the 54 calls made is a very high percentage and a very good conversion. Similarly, with your presentations or meetings, you said that you want 30 in a particular month. So far, you've achieved 5. In other words, from the 54 people that you called on the left-hand side, 36 showed interest. 5 of them made an appointment for a presentation. Setting our goals and our objectives. There must be reasons why we do this. And we're doing it to give our salespeople something to aim at, give them direction, to give them a target to work towards, to give them something that we can measure their progress against, and to make sure that once they've achieved it, obviously, it will be fantastic because you'll be happy and content and fulfilled because, wow, I mean, to reach a goal, people, I tell you what, if it's climbing Everest or if it's running at the Olympic Games, finishing a race, winning a race, regardless, there is always such a feeling of achievement if you have successfully reached the goal that you've set. And therefore, it is extremely important for our own emotional and well-being that we set goals that's reachable, and then obviously enjoy it when we do reach them and we have been successful in our goals. Just before we get to time management, I just want to summarize again. When you set your goals, you have a better chance of being successful. If like at the top corner there, we see your goals are written down. Secondly, if you have a plan of action, yeah, who's going to do what? If you're not going to do everything yourself, make sure that those written down goals are put into action. You're planning. I think there's a lot going on that notepad when they are planning. And then eventually also measure your progress. Make sure that you know that you measure it regularly. To say, all right, actually, I only have 3 more sales to do, and then I've reached my target. However, you want to do more than you have set as a goal. But by reaching your goal, it's almost as the pressure is off because you have achieved a specific achievable goal. Right, before we go to time management, anybody, any questions, any concerns? I think should probably, I don't think we have enough time. I think we might be rudely interrupted if we actually continue with time management now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to Dana, Deirdre, if you got any questions at this point about what we've done?
No, sir. You made it clear.
What is your personal goals that you've set for yourself for this year?
I've got too many.
Have you written them down?
Yes. Yes, it's taking longer to achieve them than I thought, actually.
It's no problem. At the end of the day, you will get there, and sometimes we'll see that goal number 2 that you wanted to achieve, you achieved before goal number 1. So sometimes the time frames also change. Yes?
No, that is true. That is true.
Have you any goals, Deirdre, goals that you've set for yourself for the year? Obviously, most of our goals we had to readjust because of COVID. Het julle enige sulke ervaring gehad? Is daar iets wat jy wou bereik het hierdie jaar wat jy gesê het, okay, right, dit gaan nou nie werk nie? Ek weet daar's baie mense wat gesê het, ek lees elke dag in die nuus, die mense wou getrou het en nou kan nie trou nie en gister was daar iemand gewees, ek dink ergens in tussen Denemarke en België, whatever ook al dink ek, wat letterlik oor grense, die een was aan die een kant, die een was aan die ander kant gewees en dan mag jy oor die grense gaan nie, maar dit getrou en daar's basies 'n lint gewees wat hulle net tussen hulle twee gespan het, wat hulle nou aan hulle kant te bly, maar jy weet, snaaks is goed is, niks sulke goed is aan julle kant gebeur so ver vanjaar nie, wat julle eie persoonlike doelwitte betref nie?
Nee, weet daar is 1 of 2, maar ek weet of ek die jaar by dit sal uitkom nie, so ons kyk maar.
Akademiese doelwitte sover, wat julle gestel het vir jouself, waar julle wil wees in Junie maand na die eerste semester, dit al die boksies getik?
Ja.
Yes.
Good.
Ja.
Right, so ons is reg vir die volgende stretch.
Ja.
Well, ek dink ek toe ek laas kyk het, ek het nou nie my horlosie dopgehou nie, maar dit lyk vir my om te of ons op enige stadium by die volgende minute wat ek al gaan ons 40 minute onderbreking hê. 40 minute limiet bereik het. Kom ons gemaak ons elkeen 'n koppie koffie en dan sien ons mekaar so oor 5 minute.
Okay, vraag meneer.
Is dit reg so met julle?
Ja, meneer.
Yes.
Thanks man, ons praat weer nou.
Okay.
Dankie julle, bye bye.